Hi guys, I think we are back. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Hopefully, people will be joining us, but for some reason the live ended itself. But we are back. I don't think anyone's watching at the moment, but we are back. Yeah, it must be the theme music. It must be the horror of the theme that like the gremlins and the ghosts are involved. So if you're gradually making your way back, Richard's has tweeted out that we're back, and we'll put it in the comments as well that we are here, and we'll try and pick things up. Do apologise. So, Richard Spray, I was asking you general thoughts on the match and team selection. Off we go.
Yeah, they were just better organized. They were more physical. They were more, I think, prepared to come into that match, even though they had not even really a full day's worth of rest because they had to travel. I think they knew how they wanted to play us. And the sad part about it is it just feels like the identity we had last season is just dissipated. We don't have fear factor when people come into the city ground. They don't worry about that process. I hate to say that because that sounds ultra negative, but it was clear last night, and this is what we feared. This is what you asked, Greg, and I think it came to fruition, unfortunately, which was, are they going to come in with confidence, believing they can win this match? And they clearly did that. And I thought we certainly had flashes. I mean, the goal that Ndoye score was a beautiful finish under duress, right? I mean, he was getting basically tackled at the point at which he put the ball in the back of the net, and the ball from Sells was perfectly timed. Morgan's run was perfectly timed. I mean, those are the magic moments we've seen to a degree under Ange, but there's just no sustainability for that. We'll get into the box, we'll get close to the point where we can kind of put ourselves in position to finish, and we don't. So it didn't really have a whole lot of difference. Again, not a full 90 minutes. First half looked a little bit sluggish at the beginning, sort of came to life when you look at the attacking sort of trajectory within SofaScore and you see where those things are and graphed out. We just dominated the majority of it, but it's kind of like that scene in Indiana Jones where he's in this crowd, and all of a sudden the crowd parts and there's this guy with like doing this thing with a sword and doing all these moves, and then Indy just turns around and shoots him, and then the moment's over. That's what it feels like with us sometimes. Just feels like a lot of flash, a lot of great movement and exciting sort of execution there, but then someone just takes out the gun and takes us out, and it's end of story. So yeah, I mean it's really sad with all that was going on prior to the match and all of the lead up to it and the great feelings. I think Dr. Anna referenced it earlier, just how excited she was, and it really brought to tears at the beginning with this return to Europe back into the city ground, and it just sort of unfortunately left on a sour note. And you guys know better than anyone who were actually in the crowd. But yeah, I just thought they were just such a physical team, and I mean every time, even Elliot Anderson, who traditionally is difficult to move off the ball, he's got such good balance and sneaky physicality to him as well. But he was getting hammered off the ball, and it just, we looked disorganized. We were getting points where we were like clashing into each other, so our spacing looked a little bit off. But the selection at the beginning was a bit out of box, it seemed, and maybe a little it kind of smacked of desperation when you think about it upon reflection, that we were trying to find something to spark us into just an overall better holistic performance, and it just never came.
We did get cut off. I'm not quite sure what happened. So we are back, and want to see if you're still making their way back. Yeah, we're back, and it's not helpful to interrupt the therapy so abruptly. Apologies, Dr. Anna. John Cena says, has Sells lost his brain cells this season? The Wake Up News, not a fan of Matt Sells, thinks he should be dropped with 15 goals going into his nets. Paul Morley, where are you at with your general thoughts on last night's match and that team formation, mate?
Yeah, I didn't hate the lineup. Excuse me, I didn't hate the lineup. Obviously, I was quite enthused by it with Murillo back. I was wondering whether, and I've been sort of touting for it on X yesterday morning, whether it might be an opportunity to play a back four and unleash Murillo, the sort of psycho Roberto Carlos crossover left back that he might be able to be. But obviously we didn't go that option. We went with the back three. I thought, yeah, I mean, some positives. I mean, Ndoye, it started off at wing back, obviously then moved to more of a conventional winger. He probably had his best game in a Forest shirt. I think Rich is right. Midfield, we seem to be out-muscled, I think. There was Billing had a really good game, and is it Bramado, the other big chap there, was we just seemed to be getting physically dominated in the middle of the park for probably the first 65, 70 minutes, really. And then we, last 15, 20 minutes, they seemed to tire, and Sangare came into a bit more and played some really nice balls that ultimately didn't yield anything in terms of end product. But Yeah, it was just the whole game was. I mean, I thought, conceding that first set piece, you just thought, oh God, here we go again. And I think on reflection, that was arguably the most disappointing thing about last night was that, it was so well known the threat that they would bring. And Ange talked about it in his pre-match press conferences that we know they're a threat from set pieces. We've been working on it. But there was just literally no evidence of that. As soon as a free kick, they scored from that, and then obviously 2 minutes later we get back into it. You think, right, fine, okay, we found our feet now. Let's go from here. And whatever it was, 45 seconds later, we're down again. And I think that just that emotional roller coaster that was going through probably the crowd at that time, sort of made its way onto the pitch, and we sort of, I don't know, fumbled away through the rest of the half. Really, we didn't. I can't recall any particular moments that we created after going 2-1 down, and we were better in the second half. I think we have to sort of give some credit that we had much more of a go in the second half, looked much more of a threat, but kind of a lot of the damage was already done, and it's basic stuff, set piece stuff. And I saw a tweet somewhere this morning saying that since Ange came into English football, his teams have conceded something like 12, 13 more set-piece goals than any other team. So, look, it's an issue with him, whether it's an issue with the players. I mean, we seem to have solved that issue last season, but we've taken, some big steps back in that regard, seemingly this season. And, they're the basics within a game that you need to get right. And and as Rich says, it's fine scoring. If we'd have won 3-2 last night, arguably it's papering over the cracks, because those things are still there, that they need addressing and need addressing fast. And whether or not perhaps having an international break round the corner is an opportunity to do that, and I think it is. We've got to be balanced and say, actually, that this is, he said, game after game after game after game after game with relatively little amount of time on the training field, on the training pitch to drill these guys. So, is there a bit of a not an excuse, but is there a mitigating circumstance there? Possibly, but it's still been 2 or 3 weeks. And again, you want the players to take responsibility, right? Even if they, and this is where, again, and I don't know, you don't know the dynamics that's going on the training ground, but if you'd like to think that if a manager comes in and says, right, this is what I want you to do from set pieces, these guys, Milenkovic, and he's experienced enough to maybe turn around and say, well, look, do you know what, coach? This is not what we were doing last season. This is not what brought us success. This is what brought us success. And have those conversations. Now, I don't know that. I don't know the dynamics of it, how that conversation works. But you'd like to think that the players are strong enough to put their own point across, and that between them and somebody who's an experienced manager who must acknowledge that his teams do have an issue with set pieces. They're not going to buy. But they can come up with some kind of formula that just makes us more equipped than we seemed to be last night. So, look, the match, as I said, second half, we got better. We huffed and puffed a lot more. And it was the second half was a very similar story to much of the Swansea game, bit of the Burnley game, a lot of the Betis game. We're looking really good until we perhaps get into that final 18-yard box and the thinking becomes a little bit muddled and not picking the right pass or taking a shot when there's a pass on and vice versa. So I think that all comes from just the whole confidence and the mood in the stadium of people. It doesn't impact people's decision making. So again, really difficult to see how we get out of that sort of spiral until we get a win under our belt, or until we start again really strongly and get 2-3 goals up where the pressure's off, which is feels a long way away at the minute.
I mean, going back to the game itself, I mean, I don't want to go through each goal individually that they scored. Well, not the first two anyway, because they came so quickly and they're almost, you could talk about one and say the same thing about both. But it is set piece. It is set pieces. And we knew about set pieces. And the thing about Midtjylland is they have an identity. They have a very, very clear identity and style of play and how they play. They're aggressive. Very much getting into our players. And one thing that I don't think we have is that identity anymore. I talked about it when Nuno was in charge and took over. Slowly but surely, we found an identity. We found a very distinct way of playing that worked. And everybody was on board. Everybody was on the same page. And we saw the success that it brought us. At the moment, we feel like a ship that's rudderless. And it's very, very difficult when all hands are on deck and everyone's maybe feels like they're pulling in the same direction, but maybe one or two just aren't quite sure of what that direction is. And ultimately they're pulling in a different direction because they haven't been given the clear instructions. And the captain of the ship, you know, he's steadfast and he's got tunnel vision that this is how we're doing things. And, you know, maybe he's relying on his first mate. Maybe he's relying on his chief soldiers to know their jobs, and they should be able to defend set pieces. And actually, when the ball gets flighted over and Philip Billing gets his flick on, you know, we've all talked about the Philip Billing effect, but, you know, I had my head in my hands for the second goal. But is that Ange's fault that these Milenkovic and Morato can't defend at corners and other players as well? I mean, I just don't know. I just don't know in those moments how much you say to Ange, well, that's your fault. That is all down to you, you nasty, nasty man. You didn't get them working in the way they should have been working on the training pitch. Because I tell you what, they were doing it last year. So why can't you have the best of both? Why can't you have the ability to defend set pieces like we've always done and also the free-flowing attacking football that we're looking for? Because the first two goals that we conceded were not as a result of what you would say, anybody out there, traditional Ange ball. We weren't caught on the break. We weren't caught running with our backs to goal. That happened on the third goal. And, of course, that's what you get when you're pushing all the way up trying to score. But who can legislate for Callum Hudson-Odoi having the ball nicked off him from a short corner? Who can then legislate for Morgan Gibbs-White getting skipped around like he's the invisible man? And then there being 3-on-1 and them skipping through. Who can legislate for Matt Sells going from the Golden Glove winner to a pale imitation of himself at the moment, it seems? Because his positioning for the third goal was all wrong. It was all wrong. Even I can see that. And the ball just got slotted into the net. Off they went 3-0. The bare-chested Danes in the corner in their nice V-shaped formation that looked terrible when you're in the stadium. You know, they thought it was the best thing ever. So how can you legislate for these things that are happening on the football pitch? And how much is that really Ange Postecoglou's fault? How much are we missing Zinchenko all of a sudden? The player that was coming to the team is that inverted player. And people are going, oh, Zinchenko can't defend for Toffee. But he had to take him out of the team, and it kind of affects how Ange wants to set up potentially with that person in that role. Douglas Luiz has played, two halves of football, half at Swansea, half at Betis. I can't remember if he played Burnley as well. Well, it's all coming a bit of a glare, forgive me. But all of a sudden, he's become like the player that we're crying about. Where's Douglas Luiz? So, again, I'm mentioning this because you think about Zinchenko and Murillo, who's been injured, comes back, gets injured. Think about Douglas Luiz. You know, how much do we kind of like put that into the category of, well, you know, it's out of Ange's hands and all that kind of stuff. So, again, am I making excuses for him? I don't know. Richard Spray, is Savona trusted, for example? Would it not have just been a much more sensible decision to go with 4 at the back from the start? I thought he did all right when he came on. To be fair, he didn't do anything wrong, you know. Dan Ndoye, I thought he looked lively. I don't know that it was his best game last night because I think it's different when you're sat in the stands to what you see on TV. But I came away thinking, I thought he did well. I'd need to kind of look back and really kind of get into how he played a little bit. But it just, you know, Savona for you, Richard. You know, he's gonna have an important role to play on Sunday. When we're going to preview that, we might as well preview Newcastle in amongst the whole of reflecting on last night because it's all the same conversation, isn't it?
Well, and it's the same conversation for him as it is with Ange because I mean he's new to the Premier League. He hasn't had a ton of time on the pitch. I think he played all right. I think he played all right. I don't think he was terrible by any means. I think he did a decent job considering he comes off, you know, didn't probably get much chance to warm up and get into the match because we had to get Murillo off the field, the pitch quickly and so forth because it was just clearly not working. And I don't know. I mean, it's like you said. I think the hard part is that every little thing that we see, we pick at because we're just trying to find that exact reason or that exact correlative effect of why everything is not working the way that it should be. And so on and so forth. So it's like little things become big things when things are just not going well. And to your point, I mean, I was saying this last week. It's like, do we really keep, you know, shooting the arrow at Ange for things that honestly, I think, as Paul pointed out, I've not been a professional footballer clearly, but I feel like they should be able to do. It should be second nature to them as to how they set up at a set piece. They don't let balls like that dribble across, off of a little flick header when there's 0 people at the back post. But we had back post problems last season on set pieces. We just didn't seem to be able to transition away from zonal marking or whatever it was that was creating the problem. We had problems with back posts last season. I mean, it was evident in matches this season. I don't think you can contribute all of the frailties exclusively to Ange, and when he's come in, I think it just becomes amplified when we're not getting results. And then it's, but is he the kind of personality? Does he possess that sort of not charisma, but the capacity to lift people out of a dire state in terms of the players? Does he have the capacity to kind of galvanize the fan base and do all those things? At this point, you can't really say yes to that. But as you pointed out, I mean, players like Savona need time to get acclimated. Players like Bacco need time to get acclimated. Players like Ndoye need to get time to get acclimated. But you're seeing isolated performances that look positive. But when the ball's not in the back of the net and we're not walking away with a W next to the fixture, or even a good performance with a draw, it just like I said, it just compounds everything, exacerbates everything. So I'm just struggling to find a way to manage it and process it and determine where we can go from here, to be candid. And I know that's an easy thing to say because we probably all feel a bit discombobulated at this point. But yeah, I don't know. I thought Savona looked decent. I thought a lot of players look decent. I don't think Zinchenko necessarily would have completely changed the dynamics because he's not physical. He doesn't defend well. I don't know what he would have done on a set piece that improves anything. So I maybe I'm missing something tactically, but I think it's just us clutching at straws when we're struggling to figure out how we move forward.
We talk about the squad being the best it's ever been, but all of a sudden it seems like we are running out of defenders. So no Zinchenko, we think that's pretty much been confirmed for Sunday. No Ola Aina. So we're going to think about team selection, I think, now. As still talking about last night's game, Richard and Paul, still talking about last night's game, but also thinking about what's coming up on Sunday, all right? Before we just do that, I want to just quickly mention that it was Tom Colomosi in the Daily Mail that's written that the club will be reviewing Ange's position next week. Charlotte Dunker, who writes for The Times, has just tweeted in the last 20 minutes or so. She's a really good journalist as well. She's very much in the know from what I've read of her in the past. She says there's no immediate threat to Postecoglou's position. There's been big changes and not a lot of time to make it work. Also, the early signs are there that it can click. It's a big game on Sunday and the opportunity to reflect on his first 4 weeks afterwards with the international break. So she sums up her own article, which is behind a paywall. But as I say, she sums it up. So she's saying that time's going to be given. It feels like the hierarchy are, understanding that a lot's gone on, as we've been talking about. A lot of change has happened, and there is going to be some time given to try and make it work. They think things can click into place, and it is a question of it not really clicking at the moment, and that's what we need to see improved. Ilmatic says, ultimately, in the comments, this is on Marinakis. He chose the Arsenal reject Edu over Nuno. He got Europe for us last season. Didn't let Nuno have any say on the squad, etc., etc., etc. Of course, Nuno will speak out no loyalty. Last night, just before we get into teams, one thing I did want to talk about, Paul, there was the chant about getting sacked in the morning, which I found shocking. I found quite cringy, the one about going on the piss with Nuno. I mean, it's a great chant. We loved it when he was our boss. But I kind of almost thought, well, why are they singing that? And I think that was their way of demonstrating, look at what we had. Look at what you sacked. That's what we had. Everything was great. And I've said on here before, we all came into this season feeling great. We knew what was ahead of us, European campaign. Nuno, this team, this squad, developing into a really good set of players. And then the wheels well and truly came off. So last night when that got sang, I did feel a little bit cringe about that. But I mean, just quickly on Nuno, are fans forgetful that maybe Nuno did play a part in his own sacking, or were the club always going to sack him? When that journalist broke that with that tweet, and and said the club are considering sacking him. It was Nuno that then replied to that in a press conference and said, well, look, there's no smoke of that fire. So, were both sides, the boardroom and Nuno, using the scenario to try and get what they want? And in the end, it really kind of had nowhere to go apart from him getting sacked, do you think? Or was there a chance, do you think, really, that he could have stayed?
It's one of those things I guess we'll never really know, isn't it? I mean, I don't think Nuno was blameless in the whole thing. There's obviously been a directive from somewhere within the club that they feel that a change of style is needed to progress, and I kind of get that. I think there's only sort of limited amount of success you can have with keep having 33%, 34%, 35% possession of the ball, whatever it is, and we saw that did start to come unstuck a bit towards the end of last season, and part of that to do with players being tired and not having the backup. But I think it was a multitude of things. So I understand why there was maybe a sort of moment to pause and reflect on what is the way forward, and maybe a different approach is needed. Whether that needs a different person, I guess, is the crux of it. And we seem to see in the first couple of games that Nuno was capable of engineering results with 55% possession rather than 35%. So, like I say, we'll never know what might happen if Nuno had stayed. Just go back to your thing you made earlier, point about identity and all that sort of stuff. And I think where I'll come on to what I think about Postecoglou, and I'm sure we'll get onto what we think should happen. But to cut him some slack, I think you talked about the identity that Nuno created for last season. I mean, by the time last season started, he'd been there 8 months. He came in December. We sort of we got through that second half of that first season, and then he had a pre-season. So he'd been there pretty much 8 months to instill that identity. And obviously, and we know hasn't had that luxury. Far from it. So we need to be mindful of that. Yeah, but at the same time, that you can absolutely, I think, almost undeniably say that he's probably tried to change too much too soon, and I think we're seeing what we're seeing unfold as a result of that. So, but again, that may have been maybe that be the instruction he's given. Don't wait, make your changes now and go hellfire the Ange style. So, look, I can't remember where we got to. I think the question was. What was the question?
Could Nuno potentially stay? Was there ever a way that the club say to him, "Look, let's sort this out"? I mean, but I mean, just to kind of quickly add, not Milenkovic, not Morato, Marinakis. That's the one I want. Marinakis is a very emotive gentleman, and as much as he said after the European draw, Nuno's our manager, and he said lots of good things that I thought put the fire out. And I thought, right, they're going to go and talk, and this is all going to be sorted. That feels like that was never going to happen. So, it feels like he's a very emotive chap. So, is it a case then, Paul, to kind of add on to the question? Once the decision's made in his head, that's it.
Feels that way, doesn't it? Yeah, I think he'd obviously had decided, and the fact that the speed with which Ange was installed when Nuno was dismissed, suggested that, and the story from Ange was that it all happened over the weekend. I'm pretty sure that stuff would have been going on for longer than that. And maybe now we're in this situation with Tom's article and the other article you just mentioned, whether or not that sort of stuff is now going on in the background with somebody else or other people. I think the where we've really got to think about is, and the big decision now that Marinakis has got to make is what represents a bigger gamble, doing nothing or acting. And there's going to come a point where if we don't snap out of this malaise, then we're going to have gone past the point at which we've still got options where we can attract another manager who can potentially not just salvage the season, but make it a successful one. Because I think we're still early enough to do that. If Ange manages to turn around, and I guess look, my main, if you could ask me for three scenarios, I think one of these three plays out, right? Either Ange gets a result at Newcastle, we focus, even if he doesn't get a result at Newcastle, but there's a performance at Newcastle. There's enough of a performance to say, right, we get into the international break, he has some time on the training pitch, we come back, we beat Chelsea, we have a couple of good wins, and it starts to turn. then that I guess would be, probably the preferred option of all of it, because it would be the least disruptive. The second option is we make a decision to call it a day and say, look, this has been a mistake, and we're still at the point in the season where somebody could come in. I don't know who that is, but somebody potentially could come in who could galvanise the team, and actually we go on to have a decent season, and the season that I guess what we all class as a decent season, which would be a mid-table finish and a good run in Europe. That's still absolutely salvageable, be it Ange or somebody else. The third option is we let this drift. It keeps going on. It keeps getting worse and worse, and then essentially we're in a dogfight, and we've pretty much probably got limited options. You're thinking Sean Dyche, and we just got to get through the season, and it's a dogfight, and we survive, and forget about Europe and all the rest of it. So that's the least attractive option. So either Ange has got to work, and got to work quickly, I think, or we've got to bite the bullet and try and get somebody else in who is in the position to be able to galvanise the team. I think, as much as I like Sean Dyche, that third option, I think the issue that would create if we went down that road is that I think you're almost automatically imposing a lower ceiling for what comes next. If you end the season with Sean Dyche and finish 14th, then perhaps even if you end the season with Ange and finish 14th, because you've shown a stickability if that's the case, or you've shown that you want to play football in a certain way if that's the case, and you still attractive proposition, I think, to players, to other managers. If you go down the Dyche route, you're backing yourself into a particular type of corner, which then becomes very difficult to come out of again and reset as a different identity. So, yeah, it's a really tough one, and someone's got to make some big decisions in the next couple of weeks for sure.
Yeah, I was going to get on to the idea that we do sack Ange Postecoglou and we are then looking for another manager. And as much as those articles are saying kind of contrasting things, Mr. Marinakis is an emotive chap. And once he's made his mind up, I think that's it. And I think they do definitely listen to fans. So if we go to Newcastle on Sunday, Richard, and we lose, I mean, I don't even know what kind of defeat it needs to be. But certainly if it's a 3-0 hammering, which conceivably happens, and not just conceivably with that might happen. There's a bloody good chance that can happen. I mean, if it's a 1-0 defeat and we've had a really good game, and maybe it's a contentious goal that we lose to or something, and the fans have been really treated to like some excellent football, then again you can mitigate and say, look, come on, we're nearly there. So it really probably does come down to the kind of type of defeat it is. The fans, a lot of the fans are gone now. A lot of the fans they weren't having him in the first place, and they're just not having him now. And there are people that are on the fence that have wobbled and flipped. I'm still wobbling and shaking, and I'm not quite sure where I'm at the moment. I'm trying to talk myself into it being a good idea to keep Ange. At the same time, the idea of Sean Dyche becomes completely attractive in this moment, and I don't know why. We were talking off air about it, Richard. All of a sudden, we are talking ourselves into the idea that someone like Sean Dyche coming in to steady the ship, someone who knows the club, albeit he didn't play first team, but he lived in. It's a job that he covets. We know that he would bite your whole family jewels off for a chance to be the Nottingham Forest manager. In no doubt about that. But what does that say? And Paul's right. But maybe that's where we are. Maybe it's stability that we need now. Just preserve our Premier League status. The first trip into Europe in 30 years is in danger of going down the plug hole and going down there fast. So I don't even know what that needs. But ultimately, forget I'll take a European trophy in 17th. At this stage, I'll just take 17th, thanks. Because that's really the most important thing of all, isn't it? Preserving our Premier League status.
Absolutely. And I think you could say, I agree with Paul. It's kind of weirdly like the pendulum has swung completely the opposite direction in terms of how you play football with the current, personnel and so forth that we have, which a lot of them, we know how they can play defensive oriented and low block, get him, catch him on the transition and the counter, right? To back it. And then you move all the way over to the one side, which is possession based, attacking, high pressing, all that stuff. And then high line, and then you go back the other direction again. The only difference is that at least on the other end, reverting back, at least they can at least function in that style, and they showed propensity. Yes, it's the man who installed that. As Paul pointed out, all the time he had given to building that bond within the dressing room, and then seeing that unfold on the field as well. And then with Dyche, as you pointed out, again, I'm in the same mindset. I'm talking myself into it, but it's at least he has passion for what Forest is and what it means to the community. Not that Ange doesn't care about that. I just don't know if he's the kind of personality that, as I said, that can bring everything together. There may be moments where it clicks, and to your point about the performance level on Sunday, I mean, if we lose 1-0 and we play well doing it, I just don't see that happening, because the way that they operate, and we'll get onto it.
Maybe you're saying could be kicking the can down the road a bit.
That's what I'm saying. Is that
we don't know, do we? It could be the turning point. It could be that's what
I agree. It could happen. It could be a Nuno-like performance away at Newcastle, and everything sort of shifts back in a positive direction. It could be a 1-1 draw like it was with Cooper against Wolves, and then it's just delaying the inevitable. I don't know, but I would say that if you get Dyche in or someone like that, I think what you can do is, you immediately build cachet with the fans. You immediately connect with the fan base, because they know he's a known in terms of the way he plays, and it feels a little bit more akin to what we're used to. Not saying that has to be the way that we operate, but at least I think he can build that connection with the fan base right away, because he gets who we are. He gets that the community and so forth. But it definitely feels like, it would be a really massive tide shift again back to something. But anyway, I'm sorry, I'm struggling to kind of negotiate it all in my mind. But I understand what you're saying, and I would say, though, for me, I just worry, because if we get hammered by them, goal difference isn't the most important thing, but we're really creating a deep hole for ourselves to climb out of, even if there's plenty of time. To Paul's point, that third moment, right, or that point where it's past the point of no return, and you're really gonna put yourself in a position where you're gonna have to win 5-6 in a row or something just to get any traction to move back up the table. And if we get performances like we did last night in Europa, we're not even going to make it past this phase. So it definitely feels like this is a reckoning moment. While some may say it's not quite so much with Newcastle, it's not all Newcastle. Others, like Colomos, maybe intimating that it is. Others that I've talked to say Newcastle's the litmus test for where we're going to end up with Ange. And again, I know it's not all him. He's just unfortunately going to be the sacrificial lamb in this scenario, because that's what happens with managers, right? When things are poor and things aren't progressing. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't. Sorry.
Go ahead. Cool.
I was going to say, I don't. I think, irrespective of what happens at Newcastle, if we get hammered 3 or 4-0 at Newcastle and we decide to make a change, I personally don't think we're at Dyche dogfight moment yet. I think we're still. I think if it's November, December, and we hang on and this carries on, then it's Dyche time. I think we've still got a window. If we decide to pull the plug now,
if they pull the plug, if they do pull the plug, then who is that man then? If it's not Sean Dyche, and I'm not saying it's got to be Sean Dyche. Who is it? I don't see them going to another club to headhunt someone out of a job. I don't see Marco Silva leaving Fulham. Glasner's not coming. Iraola's not coming. I mean, we're a bigger club than Bournemouth by a country mile, but he's not coming to Forest. Who's going to come to Forest at the moment? There'll be managers out there that would want it, but it feels like he's going to want to go for someone who's available. So who would it be?
I mean, the Glasner Iraola ship sailed. I don't even know if that ship was ever even in the vicinity in the first place. Anyway, to be honest, so, I don't know. People seem to think that Silva would be attracted by it, and maybe he would. And I don't know how much it would cost to get him out of there. But that might be again. So if we're going to sack Postecoglou, we need at this point in time, and if the club, and I'm pretty sure Marinakis won't want to lurch to a Dyche this early. If we're going to get rid of Postecoglou in the next couple of weeks, they need to have somebody of a certain ilk lined up straight away to come in. Whether that's Silva, I don't know if people watching the podcast earlier on, they were talking people like Edin Terzic, who took Borussia Dortmund to a final. He's not in work at the moment. I know he's obviously never worked in the Premier League, but he's obviously worked at a high level. There's a couple of others, I can't remember the names that they covered on there, but there's a couple of others that had some decent pedigree. Southgate's the other one I've been talked about. I don't think he would be keen. I don't think it's his type of project. And again, I'm not sure he's the. I quite like him, but I'm not quite sure he's would represent that change. And maybe he's a middle ground that we need. I don't know. But yeah, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult one. And like I said before, plan A would be we turn it around. Postecoglou gets it going, and we avoid all the chaos and the mess of changing again.
Yeah.
Long way from happening at the moment, particularly with the crowd turning as is. Not very often does a crowd turn and a manager gets it back. It's normally the beginning at the end. So something special is going to happen for that to turn, I think.
I think we need to not lose on Sunday. We need to beat Chelsea at home for there to be any kind of chance of it turning around. Paul's in the comments says Ange has no plan B. We're going to get slaughtered by Newcastle. Tricky Fred says the wheels have been coming off from late last season, though, and I think that you've got a point when it comes to that as well. There's others in the comments like David Rhodes saying he's got to go. Wolfie from Forest Fan TV says I've got to join the dark side because the weight's off his own shoulders. Well, I'm not quite there, Wolfie. I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm just not quite there yet because I'm trying to put the good of the club first. And at the moment, I don't know really what that means. I just don't know. I just don't know. I'm so caught in between two places, and I'm normally, once I've made my mind up, that's it. But I don't want to speak too soon because I just don't know. People are very adamant that Ange has got to go, and some less people are now saying that he needs more time. But it is still, listen, guys, I'm just making the case. It is still just 6 games. All those new players are still trying to adjust. Ange is coming in. He's got to adjust. It's new ground for lots of people. Yes, I think he's been a bit foolish. It's maybe not the right word to try and implement his style of play very, very quickly. He said in that press conference, "Oh, no, I haven't got time, mate. It'll be Wednesday." No, he's very brash and very sure of himself. Whereas actually maybe he should have just kind of taken a step back and said, well, look, we're gonna be moving and taking game by game, slowly but surely. Things will come together how I want it to be. But I'm very, I'd love him to have said, I'm very, very mindful that this team have had a very set way of playing things and have got a lot of success from that. And I don't want to strip that away from this team. I want to build on that and I want to evolve that into something else. But, I'm very respectful of what they've built and what they are. And maybe that's the problem. Spurs fans and commentators and everyone else is saying to me when I hear them, this is what you get with Ange Postecoglou. And if that's what we get with Ange Postecoglou, then I would say sack him now because it's not going to change. It's only going to go one way. But I just don't know if he's been given the right chance. And, there's been lots of changes and it is a question of it clicking. And again, last night, the goals that we conceded were stupid set-piece goals that were clearly avoidable. We didn't get carved open, apart from the third goal, which we know about. We were on the attack trying to score to get the equaliser. So when we go to Newcastle then, guys, I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to get to it finally, where we are going to look at a potential lineup as well for who we might play or who we might choose to pick in our team. I'm trying to get my FOTMOB sorted out. So here it comes. All right. So Richard, I'll come to you first. This is the team that started last night. Okay. I've Murillo, Milenkovic, Morata in the back three, Williams, Anderson, Sangari, Ndoye, and then Hudson-Odoi, Igor Jesus, Gibbs-White. It was something like that in a 3-4-3. I don't expect it to be that myself. What are you picking? What should the team be, Richard, on Sunday?
All right, so here's the problem with Newcastle. Yeah, here's the problem with Newcastle, right? So they have a very physical midfield. Sound familiar? They're really good at set pieces. 75% of their goals this season have come from set pieces. We've got those big guys in the back line in the center back position. So it sounds like a better version of Midtjylland, right? So to me, go back to the back four. I'm going to go 4-2. Wait a minute. 4-1-2, or like a 4-1-4-1 scenario again. So if that's the case, I want Wood up top. We'll start up there. I want Chris Wood back up top. I just think there's something I want to somehow capture the mystique of that Newcastle victory a couple of seasons ago. But I think the way he operated when he just positioned himself really well. Yes, he was offsides a couple of times. One of those passes I think Sangare could have played a little bit sooner. That would have unlocked him to potentially get that equalizer at the end there. But he obviously scored the penalty. He's just you need that kind of veteran presence. You need that kind of savvy on the pitch. But I agree with you. Savona at the back, Williams on the left, Murado, Milenkovic. This is your back line. Sangare, where he is. And here's where I'm going to throw a little bit of a wrinkle. I think where move Anderson over where Gibbs White is, but I'm going to put Yates where Ndoye is right now. I want physicality in the middle to match physicality. I think we need. I wanted to see it last night. I understand Ryan Yates is not of the quality of Douglas Luiz, but we need somebody who can be that guy on the pitch that can, not that Morgan can never do this or Anderson never do this, but he just lifts people. He provides a positive presence. He knows what we need to do. He can get people in position. He is our club captain. We need that kind of, I don't know, aura, I guess, for lack of a better word. And he's a good footballer. He can do some good things for us, I think. But Gibbs White on the right, and then I would put Callum on the left. And that's where that's what I want to see. We've got good, and Ndoye played really well last night. I tend to kind of agree with Paul. I think that's one of his best performances of the season. And he does offer a lot to us, but there's something to me about just keeping that midfield from falling apart that's going to be critical to how we hopefully can eke out a point potentially or even a 1-0 victory or 2-1 victory of some sort. So that's where I'm headed right now. We got Williams in the back, Murado on the left back. We got Murado, we got Milenkovic, we got Savona, Sangare in that sort of sixth position, playing a little bit deeper. Hudson-Odoi on the left, Anderson, Yates, Gibbs White, and then Wood.
Okay, I'm going to jump in and give you what I think. I mean, I don't think the 4-1-4-1 is going to work for me personally. It's not what I would want to see. I'd probably want to go more of a 4-3-2-1 because I'm looking at that midfield. I don't mind a Yates and an Anderson and a Sangare midfield. So I'm kind of thinking the same kind of players effectively, but in a slightly different formation, like a Christmas tree, which could quite easily become, Yates dropping back in between Morata and Milenkovic because he does that. He's done that a lot in the past. So if he was the one that's playing in the middle with Anderson and Sangare kind of hovering in around and Hudson-Odoi and Gibbs White playing in the pockets potentially. So I don't mind seeing something like that. I want basically us to tuck in, and I'm not really too worried about playing with wingers. Essentially, there isn't a winger on the pitch really, apart from Hudson-Odoi. But in the 3-5-2 last night, he was playing tucked in, and I like him in that position. But obviously, only lasted however long Murillo was on the pitch before they changed the formation. So I think Wood up top for me is essential. I'm not taking anything away from Igor Jesus. I know that everyone was getting a little bit carried away with him, but I think last night he showed that when Chris Wood came on, if he offers you a real focal point, and Sangare was threading through some lovely balls to him. We had some offside moments last night. Sangare for me is still a frustrating player. I still feel like for a man of his size, he can still sometimes get bullied off the ball a bit too much. But I think given that the options we've got, I don't think this is a game for Dominguez to start. I would have liked to have seen Ryan Yates last night. We said that in our pre-match build-up that Ryan Yates maybe last night against a very physical Midtjylland should have been on the pitch. He's played against teams of a better standard than that and coped admirably. So there's no reason why Ryan Yates couldn't have played last night. I like the endeavour last night from Gibbs White. From what I saw from where I was sitting, he was putting the effort in. No one can tell me that he wasn't putting effort in because he was. Anderson was everywhere, but at the same time, in other moments, not quite getting it right. Hudson-Odoi putting the effort in, but got bullied off the ball for the third goal. Nico flogs his heart out, tries so hard. Milenkovic for me is still a concern. And he's my main man. I've said this. I love Milenkovic. Everyone knows that I love Milenkovic, but for some reason, I'm just sensing that there's something there this season that means that he's just not quite the player he was last season. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know what it is. Something's missing for me. So look, I could see it being like that. I could easily make a case for us going with wingers, but I think ultimately we've got to try and protect our back line as much as possible. That's what I would do. What about you, Paul?
That's my team. The only thing I would do, just being slightly pernickety, would be switching Sangari and Yates on that graphic. But yeah, I mean, I think that's the 11 that we go with. I guess the couple of not contentious, but I guess up for debate. Savona came on. I thought he did pretty well last night. As Rich said, I thought he didn't do himself any harm. I guess the one question you might ask is obviously Cunha couldn't play last night. Cunha is now available. He's looked okay in the flashes we've seen of him, but I think Savona probably is ahead of him just from a point of view of he's got more experience in bigger games, obviously in Europe and with Juventus and stuff. So that'd be the back four, I think, given the injuries that we've got. I definitely would bring Yates in for this game. I just think if we need to scrap, and people in the comments saying he's this, he's that, but one thing he is a fighter and a scrapper, and we seem to be missing that at the minute. So we just need a bit of bite, and he gives that. Even if he's 50, 60 minutes, and you sort of swap him out for Dominguez to continue that. That's how I'd start, and then I suppose Hudson-Odoi. Of the wingers, I think Hutchinson's unlucky to not potentially come in, and I think maybe if we did set up slightly differently with two wingers, then I think he's probably just by default sort of next cab off the rank to start in one of those wide positions. But I think we need to play three in the middle of the park given their midfield. I think that's pretty much a given. And then Wood or Jesus, I think Wood obviously did look bright last night when he came on. And I think one thing, although it was offside, the second of his offside goals, that was a really tidy finish on his left foot, and that was kind of it looked back to the old tidy finish in the Chris Wood that seems to have kind of gone missing a little bit in the last few weeks. So whilst it didn't count, that was a positive sign. So for me, I think this is the side I would go with. I just think that gives us the best chance of staying in the game for as long as possible, which I think is what we need to get back to.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I think we're kind of in agreement that the personnel is almost picking itself. I mean, Ndoi for Hudson-Odoi could be the one that is different, and I think Hutchinson gets a start probably at the City ground. I don't know if he'll get his first start away, but he was lively when he came on against Sunderland. We saw that, and who knows? I'm in the camp that don't shuffle your pack too much. Just get these players playing together. If you want to get some cohesion, get the ones that are playing on Thursday night, as many of them back on the pitch on the Sunday, and get them playing together. Maybe the odd change. I mean, the Yates thing change coming in, but how will Ange set up? This is where he could save his job. If he wants to be the Nottingham Forest manager, surely he says to himself, look, if I lose this game, then it's almost like, it's a foregone conclusion that the end is there. But if I can set up and show that I can be a different manager, that I can adapt to the game and I can get that point, a hard-earned point away at a tough place to go, that buys him some time, surely, because it's about timing, isn't it? We're going into an international break. So if the club do choose to make a change, then this is probably the time to do it. You think, okay, they're off. We made the last managerial change in the last international break. There's another one coming up in November, by the way, so we might have another manager by then. You never know if we make change here. But I'm being flippant because ultimately, if you don't laugh, then sometimes you cry. But look, we are out of time because this stream is kind of part two because we got cut off on the first one. I don't know what happened there, guys. I'm really sorry. That's never ever happened before. And I don't know how we're gonna probably have to try and edit this together into one podcast, but we'll work that out ourselves. But we're gonna have to leave it there, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Please do go ahead and like and subscribe. It does us a favor, as I always say. Follow us on all your socials and everywhere. Thank you for being with us in the comments. Richard Spray, Paul Morley, I'm going to give you literally 30 seconds each for final thoughts because we just haven't got the time. Paul, I'll come to you first. I know we've probably all said it, but just final thoughts, Paul.
Yeah, I think I've outlined where I am. I think we just need decisive action one way or the other in the next week or so. My preference is that we get a result on Sunday and we'll kind of rally behind the current setup. But I think if we don't, then I think change might be on the horizon.
Okay. Richard Spray, over to you.
Yeah, I can't disagree with that too much. I think many who tend to align with what Paul thinks is probably a good place to be. It's a lot more peaceful place to be than some other places. Yeah, I think that's the case. I'm like Paul. I want to see it succeed. I have a lot more doubt than I probably ever have that it will. But I think the way that we set up, we're just going to have to fight through this one particular fixture, get to the international break, and see what can be implemented from there. As Paul said, he just has had such minimal time to really, create and provide an imprint on what he wants to do with these guys, and they're learning how to play with each other as well as far as like cohesion and how they kind of work off of one another and play off one another. But that's a struggle as well, just in general. So I'm hopeful that there will be at least a draw here, at least a close loss. If we do get a loss with a good performance, that gives us some element of hope moving forward. But as the great Brian Clough said, right, don't be stupid enough to write us off, because I still think there's enough talent and there's still enough willingness to see this season through and find success within it, even if it doesn't seem that way right now.
So, guys, thanks ever so much. I want to say credit to Forza Garibaldi for last night. It's always great when we get a TIFO in the Trent End. It was amazing to be at the City Ground for our first home game in Europe. It's the first time I'd ever been to a European game. I remember the UEFA Cup days of 95, 96, but I never got to a game. I'm old enough to remember winning the European Cup just about, and I was a child, so no games then. But it was great last night. The fireworks or the fire display, the lights, all good. But it was just what followed that was a real letdown. And I came away feeling just really, really stunned and sad, and just really trying to kind of work out how we've ended up where we are, because everything looks so amazing going into this season with Nuno and with the fans buoyant and with what was to come coming our way in Europe still to happen. So, look, we've got to pull ourselves together. We've got to tighten our belts. We've got to put our big boy and big girl pants on and just face whatever comes our way. The only way we do it is as a united fan base. And I know that people want him out and people want him in. Let's not turn on each other. Let's stand together as much as we can. And if he goes, he goes, and we move on. This club will still be standing long after this manager goes, whether that's on Sunday or Monday or in 2 years' time. We'll have to wait and see. Let's stand together, guys. That's the only way we can get through this. Come on, you Reds.
Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.